Armin was a rich man who owned many businesses in the city. People called him a millionaire because his house was large, filled with shining floors, tall glass windows, and expensive furniture. Yet inside this house, despite all the gold and comfort, there was a shadow that never left his heart. That shadow was his daughter, Ara. Ara was 10 years old, and from the day she was born, Armin believed she could not see. Doctors had examined her many times when she was young. They told Armin that her eyes looked fine, but her mind did not respond to the light. They said she might never see the world like others did. Armin accepted it, but his heart broke every time he looked at her. He spent money on treatments, on famous doctors, even on strange medicines from faraway lands. Nothing changed. His only child lived in darkness, or so he thought. Ara, however, was not a sad child. She smiled often, listened to the songs of birds, and played with the soft sound of wind chimes that hung near her window. She seemed to move with surprising ease for someone blind. She walked around her room without stumbling. She reached for her toys and books as if she knew exactly where they were. Armin explained this by saying she had trained her memory. But deep inside, he sometimes wondered if there was more. He pushed away the thought because the doctor's words were louder in his head than his own doubts. The mansion had many workers, but one of them was very different. Her name was Miriam, a young maid who had joined the house only 2 months earlier. Unlike others, Miriam did not treat Ara as a fragile child. She talked with her, laughed with her, and told her stories when the nights grew quiet. One evening, Miriam noticed something unusual. She was cleaning Ara's room while the child sat quietly on the bed. A small glass marble rolled from Miriam's pocket and fell on the floor. It bounced near the corner of the carpet. Ara's head turned quickly. Her eyes followed the marble's path, and then, without hesitation, she bent down and picked it up. Miriam froze, her hand still holding the duster. She watched carefully as Ara held the marble in her palm, looking straight at it. "Here, Miriam," Ara said softly, handing it back. Miriam took it with trembling fingers. Could it be? Did the little girl actually see the marble? Or was it only chance? Miriam decided not to speak of it yet. She wanted to be sure. Over the next days, Miriam tested Ara in small ways. She would drop a spoon on one side of the table and watch if Ara's eyes moved. They did. She would wave her hand slowly in front of Ara's face, and the girl blinked. She once placed a red ribbon on the bed and asked, "Do you like this?" Ara touched it gently and whispered, "It looks bright." Miriam's heart raced. She was certain now. Ara could see. But why did everyone, even her father, believe otherwise? One night, when Ara was half asleep, Miriam sat near her bed and asked softly, "Ara, can you really not see?" The girl opened her eyes, shining under the lamp's glow. She hesitated, then whispered, "I can see, Miriam. But I cannot tell Papa. He will not believe me." Miriam felt a chill run through her. Why would Ara hide such a truth from her own father? Why had she been silent all these years? Ara continued in her gentle voice, "Papa thinks I am blind. Since I was little, everyone said so. When I tried to say I can see, nobody listened. They said I was imagining. So I stopped trying." Miriam's heart ached. The truth was locked inside this small child, ignored by the adults who trusted only doctors and reports. That night, Miriam could not sleep. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, her mind full of questions. Should she tell Armin? Would he believe her? Or would he fire her for speaking nonsense? In the grand mansion, where silence was heavier than gold, Miriam had uncovered a secret that could change everything. The story of a millionaire, his daughter, and the truth about her side had only begun. The next morning, Miriam stood near the window of her small room, watching the sunlight spread over the garden. She felt heavy inside because she carried a secret too big for her young shoulders. She now knew that Ara could see, but the little girl had been forced to live like a blind child because nobody believed her. Miriam remembered Ara's quiet words from the night before. "Papa thinks I am blind. When I tried to say I can see, nobody listened." Those words echoed in her mind like a bell that would not stop ringing. At breakfast, Armin sat at the long table reading the newspaper. He looked tired, as if he had not slept much. Ara sat beside him, eating quietly. Miriam watched carefully. She noticed how Ara lifted the spoon perfectly without spilling. She noticed how Ara looked straight at the bowl before dipping her spoon. Armin, lost in his paper, saw nothing. "Papa," Ara said softly, "may I go to the garden after breakfast?" Armin smiled kindly. "Of course, my dear. Miriam will help you." Miriam almost spoke then, almost told him that Ara did not need help. But the fear of being dismissed from the house kept her silent. She only nodded and waited for the meal to end. Later, Miriam walked with Ara into the garden. Flowers bloomed in bright colors. Birds hopped on the branches, singing. Miriam sat with Ara on the stone bench under a tall tree. "Ara," she whispered, "why don't you try again to tell your father the truth?" The girl shook her head. "He believes the doctors, not me. He will only think I am confused. And if he gets angry, he will be sad too. I don't want to hurt him." Her words showed not fear for herself, but love for her father. Miriam sighed. She admired the little girl's gentle heart. Days passed, and Miriam's curiosity grew. She kept testing Ara in quiet ways. Sometimes she placed different fruits on the table and asked, "Which one is bigger?" Ara answered correctly every time. Sometimes she pointed at the sky and said, "What shape do you see in the clouds?" Ara smiled and told her. There was no doubt left. The child's eyes worked. One evening, a small event made Miriam more certain than ever. Ara was sitting by the piano in the hall. She loved music and often pressed the keys softly to make gentle tunes. As she played, a candle on the nearby table flickered in the wind. Suddenly, it tipped and fell. Before Miriam could move, Ara jumped from the seat, caught the candle before it touched the ground, and placed it back upright. Her movement was fast and precise. A blind child could never have done that. Miriam's heart raced. She wanted to clap, to shout the truth to the world. But Ara only looked at her with pleading eyes, as if to say, "Please don't tell." That night, Miriam made a decision. If Ara could not speak for herself, then someone had to speak for her. Someone had to show Armin the truth in a way he could not deny. The next morning, Miriam watched her chance. Armin was walking in the corridor, speaking with a guest about a new business deal. He seemed serious, his voice low and firm. Ara was playing nearby, holding a red ball. Miriam whispered to Ara, "Throw the ball toward Papa." Ara hesitated. "He will know I aimed at him." "That is what we want," Miriam said gently. Ara nodded, took a deep breath, and threw the ball. It rolled across the marble floor, straight toward her father's shoes. Armin stopped mid-sentence. He looked down at the ball, then at his daughter. his eyes filled with surprise. "Ara, how did you know where I was standing?" The guest also looked at her with raised brows. Ara froze, her lips trembling. Miriam quickly stepped forward and said with a smile, "Sir, maybe she heard your voice and guessed." Armin thought for a moment, then shook his head, letting it go. He returned to his conversation. But Miriam saw doubt in his eyes, a spark of confusion he could not hide. When evening came, Miriam sat in her room once again, her mind restless. She had taken the first step, but it was not enough. She needed a plan, something clear and undeniable, to prove to Armin that his daughter was not blind. The truth was waiting to be revealed, and Miriam knew she could not keep it hidden much longer. Miriam knew the secret would not stay hidden for long. Each day she worked in the mansion, she noticed how Ara revealed more signs that she could see. The girl's movements, her smiles when looking at flowers, her ability to choose the right book from the shelf without touching every one. These were not the actions of a blind child. Still, the biggest challenge was Armin. He was a man of logic, a man who believed only in what experts said. If doctors had told him his daughter was blind, then no amount of small actions would change his mind. Miriam needed something stronger, something that even Armin could not deny. One afternoon, while Armin was out at a business meeting, Miriam and Ara sat in the library. Ara loved the library because the windows were wide and let in warm light. She sat on a chair with a book open in her lap. Miriam asked softly, "Ara, can you read these words?" Ara hesitated, then whispered, "Yes." She began to read aloud slowly, her voice clear. Miriam listened with awe. The girl could not only see, she could also read without help. "Why don't you show this to your father?" Miriam asked. Ara closed the book and shook her head. "He will say I memorized it. He will think it is just my imagination. Papa believes the world more than me." Her words cut Miriam's heart. How sad it was that a father, though loving, could not hear the voice of his own child. That night, Miriam lay awake, thinking of a plan. She decided that the truth must come out through a situation that no one could explain away. It had to be natural, not forced. The chance arrived sooner than she expected. A week later, Armin invited several important guests to the mansion. They were business partners and old friends. The dining hall was decorated with flowers, silver plates, and glowing lamps. Ara was asked to sit at the table with her father, as she often did during such gatherings. Miriam moved quietly among the workers, helping serve food. She kept her eyes on Ara. During the meal, one of the guests accidentally dropped a glass. It rolled across the table, headed straight toward the edge. Before anyone else could react, Ara stretched her hand and caught it. The glass did not fall. The room went silent. Everyone looked at the little girl. Armin's eyes widened, his mouth slightly open. "Ara," one guest said slowly, "how did you do that?" The child froze. She looked down at the glass, then at her father. Fear filled her eyes. She whispered, "I don't know." Armin quickly forced a smile and said, "Perhaps she sensed it somehow. My daughter has strong hearing." The guests nodded politely, but Miriam saw the doubt spreading across their faces. She also saw Armin's hands shaking slightly as he lifted his cup. He could not explain what he had just seen, no matter how hard he tried. After the dinner ended and the guests left, Armin sat alone in the hall. Miriam passed by, carrying a tray, but he called her over. "Miriam," he said quietly, "did you notice what Ara did tonight?" She paused, her heart beating fast. Should she tell the truth now? Yes, sir, she said carefully. It was surprising. Armin looked at her sharply, as if searching for answers in her face. Then he shook his head and muttered, "No. It cannot be. The doctors cannot be wrong." He stood and left the room, leaving Miriam with more determination than ever. The time was near when he would have to face the truth. Later that night, Ara sat in her room, hugging her pillow. Miriam entered and sat beside her. "You were brave," Miriam said. "You caught the glass without fear." Ara whispered, "But Papa still doesn't believe." Miriam held her hand gently. "He will. Sometimes the truth takes time. But one day, he will have no choice but to see it with his own eyes." The little girl nodded, though her eyes were filled with tears. Outside the mansion, the night was quiet, but inside, hearts were restless. The walls of silence that had trapped the truth for years were beginning to crack. Soon, everything would change. The days after the dinner were not easy for Armin. His mind kept returning to the moment when Ara caught the glass. He wanted to believe it was only chance, but deep inside, a question burned. Could it be that his daughter was not blind after all? Armin tried to ignore the thought, but it followed him everywhere. When he worked at his desk, the memory returned. When he walked in the garden, he thought of Ara's quick hands. When he tried to sleep, her image came back again and again. Miriam noticed the change in him. He looked distracted, quieter than usual. He often stared at Ara when she was not watching, as if searching for proof. One morning, Armin called for Miriam. She entered his study nervously, carrying a tray of tea. "Miriam," he said slowly, "you spend much time with Ara. Tell me honestly, do you think she sees more than we believe?" Miriam's hands trembled. She placed the tray on the table and looked at him. His eyes were sharp, yet full of worry. She knew this was the moment she had been waiting for, but she also feared losing her job if he thought she was lying. "Sir," she said carefully, "I have seen things that make me wonder. Ara moves with ease. She notices things before they happen. She even reads words when she thinks no one is watching." Armin stood suddenly, his chair scraping the floor. "Reads," he repeated. "You are saying my daughter reads?" Miriam lowered her head. "Yes, sir. I have seen it." Armin paced the room, his face pale. "This cannot be. Doctors have tested her since birth. They all said the same thing. Blind. Always blind." "Sometimes even doctors can be wrong," Miriam whispered. Her words hung in the air like heavy smoke. Armin wanted to argue, but his heart trembled. For the first time, he allowed the possibility to grow. That evening, Armin decided to test his daughter himself. He called Ara into the study. Miriam was asked to remain in the room as well. "Ara," Armin said kindly, "come sit with me." The girl obeyed, sitting across from him. "I want to play a small game," he said. He placed 3 colored balls on the table: red, blue, and green. "Can you tell me what these are?" Ara froze. Her eyes darted to Miriam, filled with fear. Miriam gave her a soft nod of encouragement. Ara whispered, "Red, blue, green." Armin's breath caught. He sank into his chair, unable to speak. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Armin asked in a trembling voice, "Why did you never tell me?" Tears welled in Ara's eyes. "I tried, Papa. When I was little, I told everyone I could see. But no one believed me. The doctors said I was blind, So you believed them. I was afraid if I spoke again, you would be sad or angry. So I stayed quiet. Armin's heart broke at her words. He leaned forward and took her small hands in his. My child, forgive me. I trusted the world more than I trusted you. Miriam stood quietly in the corner, watching father and daughter. Her own eyes were wet with tears. She had wished for this moment, and now it was real. Armin lifted his daughter into his arms. From today, we will not hide the truth. We will show the world that you can see. And no one will ever silence your voice again. Ara smiled through her tears, her little arms wrapping around his neck. That night, the mansion felt different. The heavy silence that had ruled for years seemed lighter. The air carried a warmth that had been missing for so long. But Miriam knew this was only the beginning. The world outside the mansion did not yet know the truth. The doctors, the relatives, the business partners, many would question it. Many would doubt. Still, Miriam felt hope. The first step had been taken. Armin now believed his daughter. Together, they could face whatever came next. And somewhere deep in her heart, Miriam felt proud. She had been the one to discover the truth. She had been the one to give Ara the courage to speak. The journey ahead would not be easy, but the bond between father, daughter, and Maid had grown strong. Strong enough to face the storm that was coming. The next morning, Armin called all the doctors who had once declared his daughter blind. He wanted them to test her again. This time, he would not sit silently. This time, he would see the truth with his own eyes. When the doctors arrived at the mansion, they carried their bags and spoke with great confidence. They remembered their old reports well. The child cannot see, one of them said as they entered. It is unfortunate, but such conditions are not rare. Armin listened without speaking. He led them into the study where Ara waited, sitting nervously on the chair. Miriam stood beside her, holding her hand gently. Test her again, Armin said firmly. The doctors began their examination. They shone lights into Ara's eyes, waved their hands before her face, and held up different objects. Ara answered every question correctly. She named the colors, described the shapes, and even read from a book placed in front of her. The doctors exchanged confused glances. One of them wiped his forehead and whispered, "Impossible." Another cleared his throat. "Perhaps the child has recently improved. Maybe her mind has learned to see now." Armin slammed his hand on the table. "No. She has been able to see for years. It was you who failed. You told me she was blind, and I believed you. You made me treat my daughter like she lived in darkness when she was crying for us to hear the truth." The room grew silent. The doctors lowered their heads, ashamed. They had no answer. Armin turned to his daughter and took her hands. "From this day, no one will doubt you again. I promise." Ara smiled, tears shining in her eyes. For the first time, she felt truly seen not only by her own eyes, but by her father's heart. News of the discovery spread quickly. Relatives came to visit, surprised by the change. Some believed, some doubted, but all wanted to see the child who had been called blind now looking at them with clear eyes. One relative said with a mocking tone, "Perhaps she only pretends to see. Children can be clever." Before Armin could respond, Ara pointed to the man's pocket and said, "You carry a golden pen there, don't you?" The man froze. He pulled the pen out slowly. Yes, I do." Everyone gasped. The doubt faded. Ara's sight was no longer a secret. Through all of this, Miriam stayed close to Ara, supporting her. She felt joy in her heart as she watched the child walk freely through the garden, touching flowers not only with her hands but with her eyes. One evening, Armin called Miriam into his study. His face was calm but serious. "Miriam," he said, "you were the one who discovered the truth. If not for you, my daughter would still live in silence. I owe you more than I can say." Miriam bowed her head. "I only did what felt right, sir." Ara needed someone to believe her. Armin looked at her with respect. "From today, you are not just a maid in this house. You are part of this family. You will always have a place here." Miriam felt her eyes fill with tears. She had come to the mansion as a simple worker, but now her role was greater than she ever imagined. That night, Ara sat with Miriam in her room. The little girl hugged her tightly and whispered, "Thank you for giving me back my voice." Miriam stroked her hair gently. "You gave yourself back your voice, Ara. I only listened." But even as peace returned to the mansion, Miriam felt that the journey was not yet over. She sensed that life outside these walls might still bring challenges. Not everyone would accept the truth so easily. Some might question, some might even create trouble. Yet Miriam also knew that together Armin, Ara, and herself they were stronger than before. The truth had finally been revealed, and no one could hide it again. The mansion that once felt heavy with silence now glowed with laughter and light. But the story was not finished. A new chapter was waiting just beyond the gates. Life in the mansion slowly changed after the truth came out. Ara no longer had to pretend. She walked through the halls with confidence, pointing at paintings, asking questions about the world she had only pretended not to see before. For Armin, it was like watching his daughter born again. Every smile, every curious glance filled his heart with joy. But outside the mansion, people whispered. Some neighbors said it was a miracle. Others accused Armin of lying, claiming he had only hidden the truth for attention. The news spread fast in the city, and soon reporters gathered outside the gates. They wanted pictures, questions, and interviews. Armin disliked such noise. He wanted peace for his daughter. Yet he also knew silence would only grow the rumors. One morning, he decided to hold a small press meeting in his garden. When the reporters arrived, Ara sat beside her father, nervous but brave. Miriam stood close, ready to support her if needed. "My daughter was declared blind since birth," Armin said to the crowd. "Doctors gave reports, and I trusted them. But she could see all along. We failed to believe her words. It is not a miracle. It is the truth we ignored." The reporters fired questions one after another. "How can you prove she sees now? Was this a mistake from the doctors? Why did you wait so long to tell the world?" Armin held Ara's hand. "She will show you herself." He placed a book in front of her. Ara opened it and began to read aloud. Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. Then she looked at the reporters and said softly, "I could always see." But no one listened. "Please, listen to children when they speak." Her words touched many hearts. The crowd fell silent, then slowly began to clap. Some reporters even wiped their eyes. The story spread across newspapers the next day. Headlines spoke of the millionaire's daughter who had been called blind but proved the world wrong. Some called it a lesson in trust. Others wrote about the failure of experts. Whatever the view, the world now knew Ara could see. Life should have grown easier after that, but trouble soon appeared. One of the old doctors, whose name was respected in the city, felt his reputation was damaged. He began to speak against Armin, saying the family had staged everything for fame. Children can memorize books, he told the press. Children can act. This is nothing but a show. His words created fresh doubt. Some believed him, some did not. Armin grew angry, but Miriam stayed calm. She reminded him, truth does not need defense every day. Truth shines on its own. Give it time. Still, Armin wanted to protect his daughter. He arranged for an open test in front of many witnesses. Scholars, teachers, even judges were invited. They gathered in a large hall where Ara stood bravely before them. The test began. She was asked to describe pictures she had never seen before. She named every detail. She was asked to walk across a room full of objects. She moved without a single stumble. Finally, she was given a set of drawings and asked to copy them. Her hand moved carefully, and soon the same shapes appeared on her paper. The hall filled with applause. No one could deny the truth any longer. Even the doubting doctor lowered his head in shame and walked away. That night, when they returned home, Armin hugged his daughter tightly. "You have given me more pride than all my wealth ever could," he said. Miriam stood nearby, smiling quietly. She had watched the journey from silence to freedom, from doubt to truth. She knew this moment would never be forgotten. Later, as the night grew calm, Ara whispered to Miriam, "Do you think people will ever stop doubting me?" Miriam touched her cheek gently. "Some people may doubt forever. But you do not need to prove yourself to everyone. You only need to live free, to see the world with your own eyes." Ara smiled, her heart lighter. For the first time in years, the mansion was filled not with silence or whispers, but with laughter and peace. Yet deep inside, Miriam felt one more chapter of the story was waiting. The truth was now clear, but the lessons it carried were still unfolding. The mansion, once filled with silence and doubt, now glowed with joy. Ara walked freely through the halls, exploring corners she had never dared before. Armin watched her with wonder every day, as though he was meeting his daughter for the first time. But even as peace returned, the memory of past years weighed heavy on him. One evening, he sat alone in his study, staring at the old medical reports that declared Ara blind. His heart ached. All those years, he had trusted papers and voices of strangers more than the words of his own child. Miriam entered quietly with a tray of tea. She noticed the reports on his desk and the sadness in his eyes. "Sir," she said softly, "you cannot change the past. But you have changed the present. That is what matters now." Armin nodded slowly. "You are right, Miriam. Still, I wonder how different life would have been if I had believed her sooner." "Perhaps," Miriam replied gently, "but sometimes truth waits for the right moment to be seen. Maybe Ara's voice had to reach you when your heart was ready." Her words comforted him. He realized that regret could not build the future. Only love could. In the weeks that followed, Armin dedicated himself to Ara's happiness. He arranged tutors to help her study, music teachers to encourage her love for piano, and art classes so she could paint the world she had always kept locked inside her eyes. Ara's laughter filled the mansion. Her drawings of flowers and birds decorated the walls. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. One afternoon, as Ara painted in the garden, a group of children from the neighborhood gathered near the gates. They had heard the story of the girl who had been called blind but could see. Curiosity shone in their eyes. Miriam noticed them and asked Armin if they could be invited inside. At first, he hesitated, fearing strangers might disturb his daughter. But then he agreed, realizing Ara needed friends, not just walls of gold. The children entered shyly, but soon laughter filled the garden as they played together. Ara ran across the grass, her red ribbon flying in her hair, no longer hiding her sight. She told them stories, showed them her paintings, and for the first time, she felt like an ordinary child. Watching from a distance, Armin's eyes grew wet. "All the money in the world could not give me this joy," he whispered. That evening, when the children left, Ara hugged Miriam tightly. "Today was the best day of my life," she said. "For so long, I was alone. But now I have friends." Miriam smiled warmly. "You were never truly alone, Ara. You just needed the world to open its eyes, just as you opened yours." As weeks turned into months, the story of Armin's daughter became more than news. It became a lesson. People spoke about listening to children, about not letting pride or blind faith in authority silence innocent voices. Armin was often invited to speak at gatherings, but he always said the same thing: "The true hero is not me. The true hero is my daughter, who never stopped seeing, and Miriam, who gave her courage." One evening, as the family sat together, Ara looked at her father and Miriam. "Papa, Miriam," she said softly, "do you know why I never gave up inside, even when no one believed me? Because I hoped, one day, someone would hear me. And you both did." Armin kissed her forehead, his voice breaking. "I will never fail to hear you again." The mansion, once a place of doubt, had become a home of trust. The silence of disbelief was gone, replaced by the music of laughter, truth, and love. Miriam, who had entered the house as a simple maid, now felt like part of the family. She had discovered not only the truth about a child's sight but also the deeper truth that love, faith, and courage are worth more than all the wealth in the world. And so, the story of a millionaire, his daughter, and the maid who discovered the truth came to an end, not with shadows, but with light shining brighter than ever before.